you know, we've exchanged good wishes and all that sort of stuff to each other, but it's not a constant thing.
Jennifer Aniston's words carried a weight that few anticipated when she opened up about Brad Pitt in a way that stripped back decades of speculation, assumptions, and carefully curated narratives. For years, their story had been written and rewritten by tabloids, entertainment outlets, and gossip columns, but for the first time, she pulled back the curtain herself, making it impossible to dismiss as rumor. What she revealed was not the glossy picture of Hollywood romance once painted for the world, nor was it the bitter feud that gossip had turned into legend. It was something far more nuanced and shocking, a glimpse into the emotional truths of a relationship that defined an era in pop culture. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The public fascination with Aniston and Pitt never really subsided, even as both of them moved on professionally and personally. For many, they embodied the idea of Hollywood's golden couple, two impossibly attractive stars at the height of their fame who seemed to have it all. Their marriage was framed as the ultimate fairy tale, but as Jennifer revealed, the reality was riddled with complexities that outsiders could never have imagined. What made her revelation so impactful was not just what she said, but how she said it. With candor and vulnerability, without the gloss of Hollywood PR, or the evasiveness often employed by celebrities who fear tarnishing their image. She spoke about moments that had long been speculated on but never confirmed, explaining the emotional disconnection that set in during their marriage. Her words cut through the fantasy and exposed a relationship that looked perfect on red carpets, but was quietly fraying behind the scenes. By addressing the truth directly, she forced audiences to reconsider how much of what they consume about celebrities is real, and how much is manufactured for mass appeal. In doing so, she also reminded people that even those who appear to live charmed lives grapple with heartbreak, disappointment, and unmet expectations. One of the most shocking aspects of her revelation was the honesty about how unbalanced fame and personal happiness can be. She admitted that the pressures of being in the spotlight, coupled with Pitt's own ambitions and changes, created a chasm that could not be easily bridged. This admission shattered the illusion that two people who seemingly had the world at their feet could effortlessly maintain personal fulfillment. It exposed how easy it is for outsiders to romanticize relationships without understanding the weight that comes with relentless public scrutiny. Her openness also addressed the narrative that had long been spun in the media, that she had been the victim of betrayal, that Pitt had simply fallen into another romance, and that she was left in the shadows of it all. While she didn't craft her words around bitterness or blame, the way she presented her truth added a layer of complexity to those assumptions. She didn't validate tabloid headlines, but she did make clear that there were difficult realities she faced at the time. Realities that went far beyond the simplistic storylines about being abandoned or cast aside. By doing so, she not only reclaimed her voice, but also dismantled the caricature of her as merely the woman left behind. The cultural impact of these revelations is significant because Aniston's voice has always carried weight beyond the confines of her acting career. She became a symbol of resilience, of moving forward even when personal upheavals are dissected under a global microscope. By revealing what she experienced with Pitt, she added depth to that symbol. She reminded the world that resilience doesn't come from pretending everything is fine, but from acknowledging the pain and choosing to grow from it. Her willingness to detail these truths forced audiences to confront their own consumption of celebrity stories and to recognize the humanity within the headlines they so eagerly devour. Her candidness also prompted discussions about the expectations placed on women, particularly women in Hollywood, when it comes to marriage and relationships. For years, she was unfairly framed through the lens of being childless, of being left, of being unlucky in love. Her revelations dismantled those stereotypes by showing that the truth was not about being incomplete or unworthy, but about navigating a relationship that was unsustainable despite appearances. She emphasized that happiness isn't defined by fitting into societal molds, and her story became a powerful commentary on how women are often reduced to their romantic status rather than celebrated for their individuality. What struck many people most was the balance she struck between vulnerability and strength. Her words were not those of someone seeking pity or revenge, but of someone finally laying bare what had long been hidden. This tone shifted the story away from scandal and towards something much more profound, a meditation on honesty, self-respect, and closure. The shock came not only from the content of her truths, but from the way she refused to let them be reduced to gossip fodder. By controlling the narrative herself, she transformed what could have been sensationalized into something meaningful and deeply relatable. Another implication of her revelations lies in the way they reframed Brad Pitt himself. For years, he has been viewed as either the romantic lead gone astray or the tragic figure caught between two powerful women. Jennifer's perspective added shades of reality that made him neither hero nor villain, but a human being with flaws, desires, and contradictions. Her words reshaped the understanding of him in a way that few outside accounts ever could. By doing this, she didn't just speak for herself, she gave audiences a reminder that every story has multiple sides and that easy labels rarely capture the truth. The timing of her openness also matters. It arrived at a moment when conversations about transparency, mental health, and authenticity are more relevant than ever. Audiences are no longer satisfied with polished images and evasive answers. They crave realness, even from celebrities. Jennifer Aniston's decision to be unfiltered connected with this cultural shift, making her revelations not only shocking, but also emblematic of a broader demand for honesty in public life. Her words resonated because they didn't feel like they were designed to generate headlines. They felt like they were spoken for herself, and that authenticity made all the difference. Her revelations also speak to the fragility of even the most seemingly perfect unions. They remind us that love alone isn't always enough to sustain a relationship when external pressures, personal growth, and diverging paths come into play. The shock came from realizing that even a couple who appeared to have it all, fame, success, adoration, were not immune to the struggles that many ordinary couples face. This relatability struck a chord with people who have experienced similar struggles in their own lives, making Jennifer's words not just a Hollywood revelation, but a universal truth. The emotional undercurrents of her revelation also ripple outward into the cultural memory of that era. The story of Aniston and Pitt has long been etched into the annals of pop culture, but now it must be re-examined with this new layer of truth. For years, the narrative was told for them, shaped by paparazzi photos, media speculation, and carefully worded press statements. With Jennifer's candidness, that story is no longer frozen in the myths of the early 2000s. It has been reshaped into something more raw, more real, and more lasting. Her honesty also holds implications for how other celebrities may approach their own truths. The entertainment industry thrives on secrecy, image management, and the avoidance of vulnerability. By choosing to step outside of that framework, Jennifer set a precedent that could inspire others to do the same. The shock of her revelations wasn't just in what she said, but in the act of saying it at all, of refusing to let her story be told only by others. It is a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing a celebrity can do is to reclaim their narrative. For audiences who grew up watching her on screen and following her life off-screen, the impact of this revelation is deeply personal. It feels like closure to a story that has hovered over popular culture for decades. Her willingness to share the truth behind the glossy facade validates the emotions of fans who always sensed there was more than met the eye. It gives them permission to let go of the fairy tale and instead embrace the reality, messy as it may be. In this sense, her words don't just shock, they heal, both for her and for those who felt invested in her journey. Jennifer Aniston's decision to reveal the unspoken truths about her relationship with Brad Pitt marked more than just a celebrity confession. It opened a portal into a story that had long been frozen in speculation, idealization, and fragmented accounts. What makes the continuation of this revelation so compelling is the scope of its implications, not only on how we see two of Hollywood's most recognizable figures, but also on how society interprets love, loyalty, fame, and the intersection between private struggles and public personas. To explore these dimensions fully, one must look beyond the headlines and unpack the broader significance of what she shared, examining the cultural, emotional, and symbolic weight of her candor. At the height of their marriage, Jennifer and Brad represented the apex of Hollywood glamour. Their images were plastered across magazine covers, red carpets, and glossy spreads that painted them as the embodiment of perfection. For millions of fans, they weren't just a couple. They were an aspirational narrative, proof that beauty, success, and love could seamlessly align. Yet Jennifer's revelations dismantled this myth by exposing how misleading those curated images can be. What struck people most was the realization that perfection itself is often an illusion, manufactured to meet the desires of an audience hungry for stories of fairy tales in an industry built on fantasy. Her honesty forces us to consider how often we buy into these illusions, not just with celebrities, but in our own lives through the curated nature of social media. The shock of her truth stems from the recognition that behind the smiles, the gowns, and the intertwined hands was a story of detachment, disconnection, and personal struggle. Realities that the glossy surface never allowed us to see. Jennifer's openness about Brad Pitt also underscores the extent to which media has the power to shape, distort, and simplify human experiences. For years, the story of their separation was distilled into a love triangle, one that turned real human emotions into archetypes. Jennifer was cast as the abandoned wife, Brad as the restless husband, and Angelina Jolie as the seductive outsider. That narrative served tabloid sales, but it stripped the situation of nuance. Her willingness to speak about the truth, however, returned complexity to a narrative that had long been oversimplified. It highlighted how damaging it can be when the media reduces people to roles that fit into a predetermined storyline. By doing so, she reclaimed her identity from being a caricature of heartbreak and repositioned herself as a woman who lived through something complex and profoundly human. In essence, she forced the public to see her not as a character in a tabloid saga, but as a real person with her own voice. Another profound implication of her revelations lies in the examination of love under the weight of immense fame. Jennifer and Brad's marriage wasn't just between two people, it was between two public images. Every gesture, every appearance, and every silence was scrutinized and interpreted. Fame, in this case, became both a stage and a cage, turning private struggles into public narratives and amplifying the cracks in their relationship. By pulling back the curtain, Jennifer shed light on how fame magnifies both the highs and the lows of intimacy. The pressure to maintain an image of happiness becomes suffocating when the reality doesn't align. Her truth illustrates how, in such circumstances, couples aren't simply navigating their own emotions. They're also battling the expectations of millions. This insight makes her story shocking, not because it reveals scandal, but because it exposes the near impossibility of sustaining a private, authentic connection when one's life is constantly broadcast to the world. One of the subtler but significant aspects of her revelation is the symbolic act of moving forward. For nearly 2 decades, Jennifer Aniston's identity in popular culture was tethered to the narrative of her marriage and divorce. Every interview she gave was inevitably linked back to Brad Pitt in some form. By finally sharing her truths, she liberated herself from that tether. This liberation is not just personal, but cultural. It signals that closure can come from owning your story rather than allowing others to tell it for you. Her words serve as a lesson in how people can take back control of narratives that have been imposed on them, whether in Hollywood or in everyday life. The shock, then, is not only in the content of her revelations, but in the empowerment they represent, the act of finally detaching from a chapter that the world refused to let her close. An equally powerful implication of her revelations lies in what they teach about vulnerability. In a world where celebrities are often expected to maintain an aura of invincibility, Jennifer's decision to open up about pain, disappointment, and disillusionment stands out. She showed that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength, the courage to acknowledge truths that are uncomfortable, and the willingness to share them even when it might invite judgment. This vulnerability resonates deeply because it mirrors the human experience. Everyone at some point has felt the sting of unmet expectations, the heartbreak of growing apart, or the burden of societal judgment. Jennifer's story acts as a mirror for those feelings, magnified by fame but universally understood. By being vulnerable, she didn't just shock the public, she connected with them on a level that transcends celebrity. Her revelations also had a profound effect on how Brad Pitt is perceived. For years, the narrative surrounding him was clouded by either admiration or criticism, depending on which side of the triangle people sympathized with. Jennifer's truths added layers to his image, painting him neither as a villain nor as a saint, but as a man navigating his own ambitions, desires, and mistakes. This reframing is shocking because it challenges the simplicity with which audiences often prefer to categorize people. Her words remind us that human beings are complex, contradictory, and shaped by circumstances that aren't always visible. The implications here extend far beyond celebrity culture. They touch on how we, as a society, often reduce complex individuals into stereotypes rather than acknowledging their humanity. Jennifer Aniston's revelations also carry significance in the broader conversation about women and identity, particularly in Hollywood. For years, she was subjected to unfair scrutiny regarding her choices, especially around motherhood. The narrative that she had been left for someone else was compounded by assumptions that her lack of children was to blame. By speaking openly about her truths with Brad Pitt, she dismantled this narrative. She reminded the world that her worth was not tied to motherhood, nor was her marriage's failure a reflection of her inadequacy. This strikes at the heart of how society often judges women, holding them to impossible standards while absolving men of similar scrutiny. Her story becomes a testament to redefining identity on one's own terms, refusing to let societal expectations dictate the measure of success or fulfillment. The psychological impact of living under a microscope is another layer worth examining. Jennifer's revelations illuminate how difficult it is to process personal pain when it is simultaneously being dissected by strangers. In such circumstances, there is little space for private grieving or reflection. Every step becomes fodder for analysis, and every silence becomes suspect. Her candidness makes us reflect on the emotional toll that comes with fame. It's not simply about paparazzi chasing photos. It's about how the constant gaze can distort self-perception, making it difficult to separate one's identity from the headlines. The shock in her revelations isn't only in what she endured with Brad, but in realizing that she endured it while the entire world watched and speculated. Jennifer's act of speaking her truths contributes to a new archetype of celebrity honesty, one that values authenticity over image management. In an era where audiences demand transparency, her revelations set a precedent for how celebrities might approach their own stories. Rather than relying on carefully scripted interviews or evasive answers, she demonstrated that there is power in confronting the narrative directly. This is shocking because it defies decades of Hollywood tradition, where silence or spin was the norm. The implication is clear: honesty may carry risks, but it also carries the reward of connection and respect. For Jennifer, the shock value of her words is inseparable from the authenticity they carried. Another layer to consider is the generational impact of her revelations. Many who followed her story during the height of her marriage are now older, perhaps navigating their own divorces, relationship challenges, or societal pressures. Hearing Jennifer's truths now, years later, creates a resonance that is different from what it would have been if spoken earlier. Her story becomes not just about celebrity gossip, but about the enduring relevance of honesty in relationships. It sparks conversations among generations about what it means to prioritize self-respect over societal approval, to recognize when a relationship no longer serves one's growth, and to have the courage to walk away despite judgment. Perhaps the most striking implication of Jennifer's revelations is their lasting symbolism. They remind us that stories do not have to be defined by their most painful chapters. Instead, they can evolve into narratives of growth, resilience, and empowerment. For Jennifer, sharing her truth was not about reopening old wounds. It was about transforming them into lessons, both for herself and for the world. Her words symbolize the possibility of finding strength in vulnerability, of reclaiming narratives from gossip, and of challenging societal norms that diminish women's experiences. They shock not because they confirm scandal, but because they strip away decades of assumptions to reveal the raw humanity underneath. Jennifer Aniston's revelations about Brad Pitt do more than reveal the hidden truths of a marriage that once captivated the world. They challenge the myths of perfection, expose the manipulations of media narratives, and open broader conversations about love, identity, and resilience. They reframe how we see both Jennifer and Brad, while also forcing us to examine our own complicity in consuming stories that reduce human complexity into caricatures. The shock of her truths lies not in scandal, but in their humanity. By speaking openly, she turned a cultural fixation into a profound meditation on what it means to live authentically, even under the harshest lights. Her words will echo far beyond Hollywood, serving as both a caution and an inspiration. That truth, however painful, is always more powerful than illusion. Jennifer Aniston's revelations about Brad Pitt remain a landmark moment in the ongoing conversation about how personal truths can reverberate far beyond the individuals involved. When she spoke, she did more than recount her side of a highly publicized relationship. She reframed an entire cultural narrative that had hovered for years without closure. The impact of that honesty can be dissected further by exploring the emotional resonance of her words, the way they challenge societal expectations, and how they reshape our collective understanding of celebrity, relationships, and authenticity. At its core, Jennifer's decision to reveal intimate details about her life with Brad is a reminder that every public figure carries private truths. Fame often creates the illusion that audiences are entitled to the full story, that a celebrity's life is an open book. Her revelations disrupted this entitlement by making clear that for nearly 2 decades, much of what people believed was, in fact, incomplete or false. This act forces us to rethink the boundary between public personas and personal realities. Audiences are often lulled into believing they know celebrities intimately, but Jennifer demonstrated how wide the gulf can be between perception and reality. By finally sharing her perspective, she reminded the world that her silence had not been weakness or avoidance, but a form of self-preservation. The shocking part isn't just in the details she gave. It's in the acknowledgement that she lived with truths unseen by the millions who thought they knew her best. Aniston and Pitt's relationship has always existed less as a personal bond and more as a cultural touchstone. Their romance and eventual separation became part of a collective memory, shaping how an entire generation remembers the early 2000s. Her honesty now adds a new dimension to that memory, rewriting a story that had long been ossified into tabloid myth. This matters because collective memory often functions like folklore. People pass along simplified versions of events, reducing them to anecdotes or cautionary tales. Jennifer's revelations disrupt that folklore by returning complexity to the narrative. It is shocking not because the story is scandalous, but because the memory itself is being rewritten in real time, forcing audiences to confront how much of their cultural understanding is built on distortions. The timing of her openness amplifies its significance. For years, silence surrounded her marriage to Brad, which left room for endless speculation. By speaking now, she chose a moment when she is firmly established in her own identity, both as an actress and as an individual beyond her past relationships. This timing means her revelations are not tinged with bitterness or desperation. They are grounded in reflection and growth. The shock of her timing is that it wasn't reactive. It wasn't spurred by scandal or provocation. It was deliberate, thoughtful, and measured. This makes her words feel not only authentic, but also deeply considered. They reflect not the raw pain of the moment, but the hard-won clarity that comes only with time and perspective. For audiences, this makes her revelations resonate with greater depth because they carry the weight of hindsight. Her willingness to speak about what went wrong in her marriage also reframes the broader conversation around growth after heartbreak. Rather than dwelling on betrayal or resentment, Jennifer spoke about the realities of disconnection, ambition, and the evolution of personal needs. This narrative is shocking because it resists the drama-driven explanations people often crave. In a culture addicted to scandal, her perspective presents a radical shift. The idea that relationships can unravel not solely because of betrayal, but because of deeper, less sensational misalignments. This reframing encourages audiences to reflect on their own experiences of growth, change, and incompatibility, and it validates the pain of endings that occur without villains. Her story therefore becomes not only about her and Brad, it becomes a mirror for countless others who have struggled with similar truths in quieter, less public ways. Another layer of shock within Jennifer's revelations lies in how they expose the double standards applied to men and women in the public eye. For years, Brad Pitt was largely celebrated for moving forward with a new romance, while Jennifer was repeatedly scrutinized through the lens of absence. Absence of a partner, absence of children, absence of closure. By openly sharing her experience, she challenged that imbalance. She made it clear that her life was not defined by what she lacked, but by the choices she made to honor herself. Her voice became a powerful counterweight to years of narratives that reduced her to someone incomplete without a family or a marriage. This speaks to broader societal patterns, where women are often judged more harshly for relationship outcomes than men. The shock in her words is the realization that she endured not just the heartbreak of a personal ending, but also the weight of a cultural narrative that sought to define her by it. When Jennifer Aniston spoke about Brad Pitt, she effectively dismantled the mythology of their marriage. For years, it had been remembered as an almost archetypal story of love lost. That myth persisted because neither of them directly challenged it in detail. With her revelation, Jennifer disrupted that myth, replacing it with memory, her truth. The significance here lies in the difference between myth and memory. Myth simplifies, exaggerates, and distorts to serve a cultural purpose. Memory complicates, enriches, and personalizes. By offering her memory, Jennifer reclaimed ownership over a story that had been mythologized against her will. The shock is in realizing how long the myth was sustained, and how powerful it is when someone dares to dismantle it. For years, Jennifer was labeled as resilient, a survivor of heartbreak who continued to thrive. While that label carried admiration, it also flattened her into a symbol rather than a person. Her revelations add dimension to that resilience by showing that it wasn't about stoicism or denial. It was about living with truths, processing them privately, and choosing when and how to share them. This redefinition of resilience is crucial because it aligns more closely with reality. Resilience isn't the absence of pain, it's the decision to keep moving through it. Jennifer's willingness to show the depth of her experiences makes her resilience more relatable, more human, and ultimately more inspiring. The shock comes from seeing the gap between the version of her resilience the world created and the one she actually lived. Jennifer's openness also shines a light on the audience itself, on why people care so deeply about her relationship with Brad Pitt, even after so many years. The shock of her revelations is amplified by the recognition that millions were invested in their story, projecting hopes, fears, and fantasies onto their lives. Her words force us to examine that fascination. Why did this couple matter so much? Why did their separation linger as a cultural wound? The answer lies partly in the way celebrity couples become vessels for collective longing. People saw in them an ideal of romance and stability that they wished to believe in. Jennifer's revelations shattered that illusion, reminding audiences that their investment was built on projection rather than reality. In a way, Jennifer Aniston's honesty is also a masterclass in storytelling. She did not reveal her truths in anger or haste, but in a way that was thoughtful, layered, and deliberate. She understood the power of narrative and how to wield it, reclaiming her story from decades of speculation. This approach is shocking because it contrasts so starkly with the chaotic ways many celebrity stories are revealed, through leaks, scandals, or unfiltered social media posts. Jennifer's storytelling was intentional, and in that intention lies its power. She demonstrated that reclaiming a narrative is not just about facts, but about the way those facts are told, framed, and shared. Perhaps the deepest shock of Jennifer's revelations is the way they humanized two people who for so long seemed untouchable. Jennifer and Brad existed as icons, elevated above the ordinary struggles of everyday life. Her honesty about the pain, the disconnection, and the emotional realities of their marriage pulled them back down to earth. In doing so, she bridged the gap between celebrity and audience. She showed that even the most admired people face the same emotional complexities as everyone else. This humanization resonates because it strips away the artifice of Hollywood and replaces it with something far more enduring: authenticity. The truths Jennifer Aniston revealed about Brad Pitt continue to ripple outward, reshaping narratives, dismantling myths, and sparking deeper conversations about love, identity, and resilience. They shock not because they confirm scandal, but because they reveal humanity, the kind of humanity that had been obscured by years of myth-making and public obsession. Her openness is a reminder that stories are never fixed, that myths can be dismantled, and that truth, when spoken with vulnerability and intention, carries a power far greater than illusion. For Jennifer, speaking her truths was not just about revisiting the past. It was about reclaiming it, and for the world, listening to those truths meant confronting the difference between the stories we are told and the realities that lie beneath them. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Jennifer Aniston revealing shocking truths about Brad Pitt? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.